that's why I wanted to get the setup you're talking about, trying to get comfortable. Everything else will be sitting here for just a little bit. I figured, I wanted to take the blur off, kind of show some of my past titles, some of my past things that I've done, even a little bit of ode to my military up there, an award that I'd received. I mean, this whole room is loaded with lots of stuff, I mean, you can kind of see on the walls different things spinning around here. So I mean, this is kind of whenever I do videos for Sparta, anything like that, personal videos, I'll come down here, just try and give myself a little bit of a good background.
Awesome. Well, it's a very, very good background, and I appreciate that. I'm going to get you in a moment to show us maybe a few other things up close as well. Before we do though, and I'm just going to say, first of all, big thank you for doing this morning. Really appreciate it. And I'm also going to say that just on the record now, now that we're recording, because I know obviously everything that's been going on in your life, your family's life, and everything. It's not been an easy time, so I appreciate you very much for taking time out of your morning to do this. And I'm just going to start by saying that, and I am saying that for the audience, but I also mean it sincerely from my heart as well, because yeah, I just appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for your time and the opportunity to be here. I definitely been experiencing a lot over the last month, but it is the way the world is, and we just kind of keep pushing forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we will talk about everything as I've already mentioned. We're going to be talking about, your fights, your titles, matchmaking, coaching, everything in your life. But before we do, as I mentioned before we started recording, your recovery is very inspirational from the recent accident that you had, motorcycle accident, and I think you were saying we're about a month sort of out from that, and it's amazing to see you sitting here looking so well. As you've already said, you're probably feeling a bit beat up, but I think that's testament to your mindset, your, warrior, old school, throwback mindset, whatever you want to call it. I would like to talk about that from the inspirational point of view because when you're sitting here now, you show other people what they can do as well in terms of recovery from these kinds of injuries. So, can you walk us through, Vern, please, what happened and how your recovery is going so far? Just to start things off with that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it was a little bit more than 4 weeks ago. We're right at about that 31-day period now. So it's been a month. Beautiful morning. I was out on my motorcycle. I have a 2017 Harley Davidson CVO Street Glide, so just a touring bike. And, went to a remote part of Colorado, small town that I was going to do some work in. Picked up a check, was coming back, on a back road, just kind of moseying along, was behind a number of vehicles, two pickup trucks and a big rig, a diesel, that was in front of me going across a bridge. And as we got across the bridge, we came to a passing lane, a passing zone, where I could legally pass. I checked my surroundings. I looked out, I passed one pickup truck, no problem. I checked surroundings again, went to pass the second pickup truck. He wasn't very aware, he wasn't paying attention. As I was coming up on his quarter bumper, just kind of starting to mosey up next to his truck, he swerved hard and fast, trying to get around the big rig because he got impatient. I recognized the danger right away. I've been riding for more than 40 years. So, I recognized the danger right away. I seen the front of his vehicle swerve. I tried to swerve with the flow of the vehicle. It put me on the oncoming side of the road in the shoulder. That was a mix of asphalt and gravel with about a 2 inch drop into the gravel. My bike ended up dropping into the gravel. That's a 900-pound bike. You're not going to pull it out of the gravel back onto the asphalt. And I felt the tires start to get a little loose on me. So I ended up deciding to take it into the field that I was next to try and save it, try and recover it. And I just wasn't able to. It probably, I rode it out in the field about another 25, 30 feet as the handlebars were starting to get real loose on me. It ended up locking one of the wheels to the side, and the bike kicked up backwards, from the rear end, and it kind of hit me in the back and hit me in the back of the head and threw me about 25 feet. I hit the ground hard, obviously I don't remember being thrown from the vehicle and landing. All I remember is controlling the bike the best I could, trying to time it whenever the wheel locked in the dirt, and then just letting go and wrapping my body up, to just try and hold on. I was fortunate that I had a helmet on. I'll have to send you a picture, Liam, but I mean, you'll see my helmet and be like, holy smokes. It split my helmet. I had a half helmet on it, split my helmet completely in half. There's probably about that much of it still attached, where you can pull it apart. I had a very good motorcycle jacket on, a Nomad motorcycle jacket that, had back pieces to protect me, shoulder pieces, elbow pieces, and I was just very lucky that morning that I had my gear on. I don't always ride with my gear. In the future, I will always ride with my gear because I do plan to ride again once my body's healthy and recovered. It's kind of amazing that for the morning, the way things happened. The EMS, state troopers, everybody came out there to where we were at in the location. I was up on my feet. I was walking around, answering questions. I was just more than anything kind of really pissed off. I was fueled a little bit by adrenaline naturally and just anger because of what had just happened. And, with all my past experiences, like I said, I've been riding for more than 40 years. I've been in combat sports for 35 years. I'm a combat veteran in the Marine Corps. My body's been put through hell so that I know how to handle falls and know how to handle certain things. And really, all of it came together in just a flash and a blink of an eye. And that's what saved my life. It really did. And, I'm fortunate today here, 31 days out. I just had my first physical therapy session yesterday. My trainer, really kind of kicked my butt a little bit because he knows I haven't been able to do anything for a month. But I'm on the road to recovery. I'm on the mend. I'm happy. I'm healthy. I'm up and moving around. I'm still dealing with some soreness, especially in the upper back and my neck. I did suffer compression fracture in my T1 right at the neck joint in the back, the spine. Got a torn ligament in my right ankle that I'm dealing with. But outside of that, I could have a split noggin right now. I could possibly not even be here, with you and I having this great conversation this morning. So, I'm blessed. I'm really fortunate.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's like I said at the beginning, for everyone watching this, Vern and myself got on here before we started recording. First thing I said to him is really good to see you looking so well, and that's the truth. I mean, it's as simple as that because I know we were talking about setting this up around the time of the accident, there or
Yeah.
thereabouts, and so and then I saw everything happen. And I thought, oh my God, and then but you're still here and happy, healthy. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. Okay, let's get into it with the fights, the matchmaking, everything else that people want to know. Now, I'm gonna also talk about something here. You've got your own personal Hall of Fame. Now, you've had a lot of fights, as in hundreds. I mean, you've had a lot. But
Yeah.
can you tell us how many it actually is, just for anybody? I mean, I'm not sure the exact number. I know it's in the hundreds, but how many fights are we talking, Ben? Do you keep track?
Yeah. So I walked into a boxing gym for the first time when I was 12 years old, and that was in 1990. So that's 35 years. And that's whenever I started training, started competing and fighting. And in the 35 years that I've been involved in combat sports, it took me probably 3 or 4 weeks to kind of compile this number the best I can to make sure that it was as accurate as possible. But talking with old trainers, old training buddies, even old opponents, everything else, and looking at my history, I've had 296 fights. In 35 years, I've fought almost 300 times. I'm a few months shy of being 48 years old right now. I plan to get to 50 by the time, or plan to get to 300 fights by the time I'm 50. So I got to get my body healthy again. I'm giving myself a couple of years here to, take 4 more fights, but I've had a lot.
Wow, you've been a very, very busy man, and that is absolutely amazing. I mean, I knew it was a lot, but I'm hearing that number. Okay, incredible. Now, obviously, one of the things I'd love to do here, Vern, I would love to talk about all of them, but we would be here until next week. I think we'd be here for a
Yeah.
very long time. So, the best way I can think of to break it down is talking about your favorites, the ones that are most special to you. Now, I'm aware that's a very big question because there's going to be a lot of great memories, there's going to be a lot of great moments, a lot of special moments. And I don't mean to put you on the spot to kind of pick only a handful, but that is kind of what I'm going to do because I love asking this question because you never know which ones are going to come back. It's very different hearing it from your experiences than it is from watching the fights or any assumptions that I may have about your experiences, which I leave those at the door. So if we say about your favorite moments, if you had to pick, three, four, five, something like that, what would they be, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, my very first fight, I have to say, right off the bat, is, probably my first boxing tournament. I can't remember the kid's name. I was 12 years old. It was my first smoker tournament is what it was. We were allowed to box more than, once or twice, but I was a nervous young kid. I got into boxing, strictly based off of the fact that I would get bullied as a child. I was a skinny kid back then, little guy, and I was just a country kid, and I didn't know how to back down to people, but I also didn't know how to fight at the time. So whenever I walked into a gym at 12 years old, this is back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, like I said, 1990 when I walked in, where, gyms, they're not like today's gyms, where every coach, every trainer is looking for your money. They'll sign you up right away. Hey, what do you want to do? You want to be a world champ? Train with me. It was none of that. It's like it was an old boxing gym. I'm from Clovis, New Mexico, a small country town, and I walk into this gym, and there's a couple of older guys sitting over in the corner smoking cigarettes, and this room is small, mind you. And it's like today you don't do that. Everybody's health conscious. And I walk in and I walked up and I said, hey, I want to learn how to box. And they said, okay, great. Go box. That was my first lesson. They told me just go box. That was it. And I had to show up every day for 4 months, consistently on my own, showing that I was willing to watch, willing to learn, willing to listen, willing to do everything I was watching the other kids do, before finally, after about 4 months, one of the coaches, George Senna, come over and asked me, hey, you want me to show you how to hit that bag? Let me show you how to hit it. And that was my first real instruction. So following that, about 2 months later, I'd only been in it about 6 months now. There was a smoker going on in our hometown of the Roy Walker Gym, and they asked if I wanted to participate and be a part of it. And smokers are, it's a turned up sparring session. It's having a chance to spar with somebody that is not in your gym, that is not, affiliated with what you do. So, it's getting to meet other young fighters, other coaches. And that very first fight, that very first smoker, that was probably one of my favorites because I got to go out there. I got to learn at an early age of 12 years old. What I tell grown men these days is everybody should be punched in the face at least once, because then you realize it's not as bad as you think it is, and you can probably handle your own better than you thought. So that first fight an important one for me. I was in there against a kid that had more experience. I held my own. I did really well. Naturally, you don't necessarily win or lose a smoker. Both kids get their hands raised. Difference being is I dropped the kid. I dropped him to the point that he quit, and his coach has stopped the fight. So we take that as a win. So that was special to me to realize, man, I could hang in there. Next favorite one, I was just out of the Marine Corps. This was at the end of 2002, September 2022, or not 2022, I'm sorry, 2002. I had got out of the Marine Corps, after being recalled back following 9/11, and serving, overseas again. And I get home, I didn't have nothing going on. A buddy of mine said, hey, I can get you in one of those full contact fights. Back then it wasn't all glorified as MMA and mixed martial arts. It was just called full contact fighting. And I said, yeah, man, let's do it. And my very first fight, this was the first mixed martial arts fight or full contact fight I'd ever been in that wasn't a street scrap or wasn't, a bare knuckle fist fight or anything like that. And, I had, got into this fight and, thought, man, I'm going to get my butt kicked. This kid's this much taller than me. He looks like he knows what he's doing. He's got 3 or 4 fights under his belt. And I went in and I beat him not only once, but twice in a single round. Back then they didn't have, strict sanctioning and commissions everywhere that was overseeing everything. So I go in, this kid throws a couple of shots. I blocked him. I laid in with a big right hand, and the kid had never been punched like that. He'd never been hit. And I got the fight to the ground. I was welling on him pretty good. The ref stopped the fight. I thought, man, hey, that's it. What a rush, And then the referee tells me, hey, stay ready. They might let you go again. And the kids' coaches jumped up on the apron. We were fighting in a ring, even though it was MMA. They made a motion about how their fighter was good. It was stopped too early. They wanted to go again. You could see in his eyes he didn't want to go anymore. So they let it happen a second time. I rushed the fight, or pressed him real quick in his corner. I ended up kicking his legs out from underneath him. He tried to crawl out of the ring, and that's why I'll always remember that one really well. I trapped him in a rear naked choke, rolled him back into the ring, and he tapped right away. After that, I'd had so many fights, to that I'd probably have to say, one of my favorites was coming back off of the shelf after, being on it for 6 years. And this was just last November, whenever I returned to bare knuckle. And, it gave me a reminder, a reminiscence, kind of the very first time I fought bare knuckle, which was in the pit fighting circuit in Southern California. And this was in the late 90s. I fought bare knuckle for the first time in 1999 with a bunch of cars surrounding us. And you would have thought it was a movie scene, but it was a real fist fight with real money on the scene, but everything was underground. So, nothing was reported. I come to find out I was on the same pit fighting circuit at that time with Tank Abbott. But that brings me back to last November. William Myers out of Ohio, he was willing and reluctant to step up, considering my experience. Come out, let me shake the rust off with some bare knuckle, and he stood in there and he cut me. He landed a shot that cut me, which I was surprised with. I hadn't been cut in more than 10 years. But after that, I knew that I wanted to pour the gas on a little bit and just kind of, that fire was already lit and I just wanted to go. So I put him away quick in the second round. And then probably my final favorite one, or one of my favorite ones anyway, that I'll mention is my last one, which I didn't win. Fighting another veteran, fighting on a military card, the Sparta hosts, headlining it the first time I'd headlined a fight in 17 years. Two titles on the line. That was historic. With the military kind of just bragging rights title on the line. He was an Army veteran. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. And I mean, just what made that fight so special is, I guess, this kid, he's 14 years younger than me. He said that he'd been watching my career and watching me fight since 2008, since he joined the military. And, it was just kind of inspirational to him watching me, as a young man. And then he joined the military. Comes to find out that he shared and served in some of the same parts of the world that I did. Both of us had served in Afghanistan. So that was pretty special. And, after we talked, I went out and, he put on a hell of a fight. I put on a hell of a fight. I ended up damaging him pretty bad. I broke his cheekbone in the first round. He cut me, gave me the second cut that I've had in 10 years, and gave me a pretty gnarly cut over my left eye. He broke my orbital. I broke his cheekbone. This was all in one round, where we were out there banging like big boys should. And at the end of the round, the refs thought that they seen enough in my cut. They didn't want to give me the opportunity for the second round, so they stopped the fight, and that was their reason, was my cut over the eye. So, first thing I could do is hug that kid's neck. We took a shot of whiskey right there in the middle of the ring, and I just wanted to congratulate him and give him all the gratitude in the world just for the opportunity to, step in there with him. He's a young upcoming guy, and that was, that's kind of it. I've had so many great fights over the years where, many of them just bring back wonderful memories. One thing I will offer, that a lot of fighters are out there, young fighters. It doesn't matter if they're on a regional scene, if they're on the biggest scenes in the world, UFC, Pro Fight League, ONE FC, anything like that. Most of them, they lose the passion in what they do. They lose the passion in martial arts and start chasing money. And that's fine. That's fair. That's their job. They want to be paid the best they can. They want to be paid more money. But I always put myself in a position to know and understand that fighting wasn't going to be my payday. So I have 100% until this last fight, because I took care of some stuff. But I have 100% in my professional career, which is over 100 pro fights. Always donated every bit of my money. I've never kept a dollar. I've never, spent anything on my bills. I always use my sponsors' money for that whenever I got great sponsors. And I've had some of the best, especially here in Colorado. But yeah, it's just been a wild ride. And, in the next 2 years, Liam, I got four more left.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see those four, to see you make it to that big number, 300. I mean, that's going to be something very, very special. But no, I mean, it's awesome. You've done a great job of condensing that down, after so many years. I was thinking when I asked that question, man, that's a big question, the amount of years of experience. But no, very, very awesome, and really an honor to hear about that firsthand, I've got to say. Now, a couple of other things here, Vern, as well. I'm curious about something, the mental side of this as well is another aspect. Now, where I'm going with this is like Marine Corps, 296 fights, the amount of years you've been doing this, everything like that. A lot of mental toughness. The same with the recovery from your accident, and I'm sure all types of other things that you've been through in life and you're still here. And I think this is going to be a great lesson for young people out there because you don't always see that nowadays. You do in certain quarters, but I think they need some advice. That mental toughness, is it something you were born with? Is it something that you've cultivated and grown like a muscle in the same type of way as training physically? And what would your advice be on how other people can cultivate the type of mindset that you have to achieve their goals? So I know there's a couple of sides to that question, but hopefully it makes sense where I'm going. And basically, your advice on mental toughness would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to say it's probably a little bit of a collaboration of being born with it, but also being put in positions in my life where I had to teach myself to train my mind. I constantly, share this with young fighters that, their training isn't restricted to their physical demeanor, their physical ability to understand what they're doing, but you gotta train the brain just as hard, and if not harder, than how you train the body. And that's because your mind, your body, it's gonna constantly be in a battle with one another where your body feels certain things and it wants to give up. And if your mind allows it to give up, or if your mind gives up, then the body quits easy. Me, to my accident, to my 296 fights, to my time in the Marine Corps, it all starts with my upbringing. And, I was raised by a Vietnam veteran dad who served in the Army. Country kid, like I said, that's what I am. And he was a country boy that was just kind of raised, hard nosed and tough, and, raised around more brothers than what I was raised with. I was raised with primarily sisters. Matter of fact, I have all sisters minus one half brother that's about 10 years younger than me, that, he and I haven't been the greatest part of each other's lives. So I never really had another boy there. It was always me. And, if I hung out with other kids that were males or roughhouse or whatever, was with cousins. So my dad's upbringing, he expected the best out of me. I was his only boy for a lot of years, so he expected me to be as hard and as tough as him. I wasn't put in a lot of positions as a kid to be able to cry or sulk about, little things, or what was deemed little by him. I would, it's like, honestly, I've had these conversations with older sisters of mine and everything else. And it's like the way that I was raised in my time coming up would absolutely be considered child abuse these days, just because, there wasn't no room for weakness. There wasn't no room for boo-hoos. There wasn't no room for any of that. I'll give you a quick story about my, mental toughness. Was whenever I was 11 years old, my dad was tickling me, kind of goofing off everything else, pulled me onto his lap and was tickling me. And I started kicking, and I was kicking his shins, not with intention, but just kicking. I'm a kid, and he wrapped me up. He wrapped my legs up with one of his feet, one of his legs, and he kicked the shit out of my shins with cowboy boots on. And that's because I physically hurt his. Well, that kind of damaged me more mentally than it did physically, but it made me cry as an 11-year-old kid. And he asked me what I was crying for. And the only words I could mutter out of my mouth at the time was, I just wanted to be like him. And he looked me dead in the face and he said, "You don't ever be like me." And it took me a lot of years until I became a father to understand that he didn't mean that maliciously. He meant it more along the lines of, he didn't want me to become the man he was. He didn't want me to be that hard, that cold, to people. And it took me a long time to realize that. But it helped with my mental advantage, I guess, in life, about, being prepared for anything. It's like physically we have to train and we have to learn certain things that we're doing, from the fight world to the military to everyday life, to recovering from an accident to anything. But mentally, if we're approaching the physical side of things, then it all starts right here. I wake up understanding every day that my day might be tough, it might be easy, and I prepare for that, accordingly. If it gets tougher throughout the day, then I mentally adjust so that I can physically handle what I'm doing. A lot of younger people, younger fighters these days, just younger people that aren't even involved in, competitive sports. I think way too many people are weak-minded because of, their upbringing. Children are a product of what they see. They're a product of their upbringing. And me, I was brought up tough. It doesn't mean that I'm better or tougher or harder than any kids these days, but it means I definitely came from a different era, a different world, to where mental weakness just wasn't something that was going to do anything for me. Whenever I was 17, I told my dad I lost out on a couple of scholarship offers for university, for college, and I told my dad I was going to join the military. And at that time, he had asked me what branch I was going to go into since I was going to join the military. And I said, well, either the Army or the Navy, because he served in the Army and I had family serve in the Navy during the Korean War. And he's the one that pushed me to the Marine Corps. He said, you think you're a young, tough punk. Why don't you join the Marine Corps? They say that's the hard one. That's the challenge. That's the tough one. So that's what I did. I kind of took it as a poke in the chest and, kind of a piss on you type approach and figured, all right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And I joined the Marine Corps and, came out afterwards and told him, I said, all you did was give me bragging rights till the day I die. That's it. Now I got bragging rights, because I did something nobody else in my family has done. And to today, nobody in my immediate family still has ever joined the Marine Corps. I've had family go in the Air Force, the Army, the United States Navy, never the Marine Corps. And that helped me in the Marine Corps. I put myself in the best positions possible to promote quickly, to receive rank, and then I ended up getting myself in trouble. I served brig time. I lost all my rank. The brig is the federal penitentiary. I served about 6 months of time there. Over getting into a fist fight with a first sergeant, being potentially threatened to be processed and kicked out of the Marine Corps, and all of it comes back to the mental toughness to recognize that that's what I needed to handle. In my civilian life, it's been no different, than anything I experienced growing up. Anything that I experienced in the Marine Corps, I had my ups, my downs, my rough roads, where I had to, have that mental anguish to say, what, I'm better than this. I'm stronger than this. I can fight harder than this, because I put myself, with my PTSD from the military and everything else, I put myself in some bad spots in life, in and out of jail, drinking offenses, alcohol related offenses, fist fights. This was before, during, and after, being a professional fighter for a number of years. Now I've kind of had my nose clear for, clean and clear for about 15 years. The last time I was in trouble like that was in 2010. But, all of it comes down to the fact that I wasn't afraid of the mental capacity it took to get back to where I needed to be. I wasn't afraid to look myself in the eye. I tell people this these days. You have to truly take a look in the mirror and you have to look that person in the eye that's looking at you. You want to be able to recover, you want to be able to get past anything. Well, then don't be afraid to self-reflect. And everybody's afraid of the monster in the mirror. They're not afraid of the world around them. And I was afraid of the monster in the mirror for a long time. And, it took me, a lot of years. My father's passed away now. My mom's passed away. We mentioned earlier, I have a niece, currently in ICU, in a hospital. I've got family that has had some really, really bad, times throughout life. And, here I am still plugging away, trying to be the best person I can, but understanding that it doesn't come without sacrifice and willingness to challenge myself and look myself in the mirror. I hope that answered your question. I hope I didn't get too broad spectrum away from it, but
No, that's a great answer. I mean, first of all, Vern, I appreciate the vulnerability with that because, everything that we talk about here, I'm thinking, how's it going to help other people? And there's a lot of what you shared in there that's really going to help other people. So I appreciate the openness, the vulnerability with that. What you're saying there about, what looks back at you in the mirror, looking yourself straight in the eye. Well, I'm not going to go off topic. I personally understand that more than you may realize, but also for anyone listening to this, it's a massive process, and yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that anyway. Okay, now
absolutely. I mean, it's something that I try to convey that message to all of today's youth, young fighters, and I let them know that, even in my job title, my experience, what I do for a living, it has nothing to do with just trying to be a good person and trying to help people out. And I constantly let young fighters know that, they need to face themselves. That's where they find their reality. And if they need advice, I'm always here. I'm always happy to help.
absolutely, I love that. Absolutely love that. I mean, this is the thing that relates to my next question now, which is about the work you're doing in other areas of fighting, basically. So the coaching, the matchmaking, the other things, because you're teaching people about life. You're not just teaching them about combat sports. You're teaching them very much this process about the inner work and about life lessons, all of these things. It's very, very powerful. So, okay, and that is what I want to touch on because now, with the extensive experience you have as a fighter, as a person, as a man, and Marine Corps, everything, you're bringing that together to sort of share it with others, basically. The matchmaking, the promotional side, the coaching, these are the things you do. I'd love to hear a bit more about those, a little bit more about what your roles are, but also a little bit about how you feel to be passing on this knowledge in this way, that we're just talking about, because everything you just said there, I'd imagine is a massive part of your your current roles now. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more about that, please, Vern. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I from whenever I started fighting in 2002, I never necessarily had the aspirations to be a coach or to pass on the knowledge that I had. I did have the aspirations to try and rise and be one of the best fighters in the world. I can say that I never necessarily reached that mark. I feel like I fought some of the best fighters in the world. I definitely feel, in my combat sports journey, that at once upon a time I was probably pretty highly ranked and well respected, and I still feel like I'm well respected these days. Even at my age and everything else from my experience. But I'd fought for 3 or 4 years in the early 2000s where I was really a recognized name and just growing. But with my PTSD mixed with, my ability to push through the mental anguish that I dealt with, it's like I could literally party all night and then go train all day and, be comfortable in my skin. And a lot of young fighters these days, they try to do that as well, but they get in trouble a lot more. And in that era, if I put myself in a bad spot to get in trouble with the law, I got in trouble, but I always faced what I had to. And the more that I moved into it, I just kind of realized, all right, maybe I have something to offer. So whenever I started to coach people, this was in the early to mid 2000s. I really didn't offer a whole lot in terms of technique and structure. It was more of a like a catch me if you can type training session where, hey, I'm doing this. This is what I'm working on. If you want to learn, do the same thing. It's like watch me and do what I'm doing, and that's kind of how I started out to coach people. So you push forward a few years. I had moved from New Mexico to the East Coast after I got out of the Marine Corps and was fighting. I was drinking heavily, very bad, back then, and it eventually brought me, from the East Coast down to Alabama to the South to eventually here in Colorado. And in Colorado here in 2010, it was probably one of the worst years of my life. I had suffered, or had not suffered, but I brought it on myself. Had two DUIs that year. Spent a lot of time in jail. My father passed away in 2010. I was very close to him just from the way he raised me and the way that my upbringing was, because I looked at him like he was a walking, talking God whenever I was a kid. And it's like he wielded the hand that I was intimidated by and everything else. And it was one of those deals where that was just such a rough year between my PTSD, my drinking, my father passing away, that I really didn't know where I was going to go from there. I had a very, very good job, a high-end, high-paying job, and I was doing a lot trying to fix my personal life, that self-reflection that I had mentioned. I'd faced the judges and said, hey, whatever you got, hit me with. I'm not running from it. I'm not pointing fingers. This is on me. Let's go. And a lot of that kind of helped out with my approach. And in 2011, I was sober at the time, still dealing with a lot of things. Late 2011, I had met these two young kids, Chris Lucia and Kyle Dickey, and they were young men, in their early 20s. And here I was in my mid 30s now, or getting close to my mid 30s. And I think I was 33, 34. And these kids, they just pestered the hell out of me, man. They wanted me to coach them. They wanted me to teach them how to fight. They were athletic, and I didn't have any interest. I'd had such a bad couple of years. And I remembered how I used to coach people with that whole, okay, well, keep up if you can. So finally, they pushed me to coach them one day. I mean, they were persistent, and I appreciated that because it saved my life. And I'll get more into that in a moment. But they were very persistent, and finally, I decided, you know what? All right, let me teach you some stuff. And I started to coach them from an actual coaching perspective instead of being the athlete and, hey, just follow me. So I started to correct, a lot of their position and their posture, helping them build a base and a foundation, so that they understood what they were doing. And from there, it kind of grew like wildfire, my coaching style. I was the guy that I'd worked for. I lived on his property. It was 10 acres. He was a self-made man, very, very, financially well. And he paid me a lot of money. And, he put me in a position to turn a pole barn he had into the property into a gym. So we turned it into a gym between the three of us. Then I brought on another coach, a wrestling coach, Rocky Johnson, who he and I worked together and coached together for a lot of years. And from there, the team just grew, and everybody kind of bit into my coaching style because I was hard nosed, and everybody knew that I loved them, but I would challenge them. I'd push them. I didn't know how to, not be not to be that authoritative type, coach to where it's like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. And that's because back then, I got more effort out of athletes instead of attitude and emotions and everything else. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody that was willing to come in, do the work, earn their opportunities. And, I was really blessed. So coaching took off from there. I would return to fight a couple of more times in that time period. And then in 2013, I would quit fighting altogether, in the cage. I'd quit fighting MMA. And my last opponent, also one of my favorite fights, Jason the Dragon Lee, in the cage anyhow. And I mean, we put on a great fight, short lived. Another one where I was donating a lot of money. So I'd suffered an injury a few days before the fight, but, I don't pull out of fights, if I can help it, especially that close, because I got too much pride in understanding that other fighter put in a lot of work too. So he doesn't deserve that, So I fought injured, but, just that night he was the better man. And, I had no problem kind of letting him know that. So, coaching brought me kind of full circle to where after that fight with Jason Lee, I decided, you know what, I only want to focus on my athletes. I only want to help these guys grow. I want to see them reach, the stars and mountaintops that I never did. And I feel like I fought on some pretty big stages in my time whenever I was a younger guy, and to capturing a couple of world titles and everything else. And it was one of those deals where that's what I felt like I was meant to be. And I used to tell everybody, I'm gonna go down, as a better coach than I ever was as a fighter. If I'm ever talked about in the history books of martial arts, it'll be, as a coach, and not as the fighter that I was. And I had only lost out of those 296 fights. I've only ever lost a handful of them. And I've been very fortunate, but that's because of my style, in contrast to how a lot of people's style were back then. These days, everybody's well rounded to where if you're not able to keep up, you're going to get beat. So I went from coaching, had a few bumps, on my road coaching whenever I would try and grow the gym or change the gym. Eventually, that changed my direction and my path. I became a vice president of Primal Fight League in 2016, I believe it was. That was a new promotion that me and a partner had started, and to today, we're still the only promoters that have ever had an event at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The Olympic Training Center is a big deal because, I mean, that's where the USA boxing tournaments take place. That's where the USA wrestling tournaments take place. And we're the only promoters, even to today, and all these years of professional and amateur mixed martial arts that has been in that building. So that kind of took its turn to where I started to help out a lot more on the matchmaking side. We only put on 3 events with Primal Fight League. So I started working with Sparta, or had been working with Sparta since about 2010, off and on as a coach, as a fighter, offering some advice here and there as a matchmaker. In 2016, 2017, I really stepped up to the plate after Primal Fight League went down. And Jeff Cisneros, the owner of Sparta, let me kind of work on the matchmaking team. And I wasn't in the same position back then that I am now, clearly, because I was just kind of coming in and he had somebody else running it all. But I had a lot of different ideas, I had a lot of different approach. I let them know that even back then I would always be more of a coach instead of a matchmaker or a businessman. So that means whenever I'm looking at fights, looking at offering fights, whether you're an amateur or a pro, I'm looking for a fair opportunity. I'm not looking to mismatch or, sandbag, a lot of these fighters, because all of that happens, and it happens still way too common, way too often. And fighters are put in, very dangerous situations. They're already getting into a fight. So, how much more, dangerous can you make it if you're lying to them or not communicating clear with them? These guys don't understand how dangerous this can be. So, fast forward a few years or a couple of years after that, 2018, I decided to return to fighting. My mom had passed away. My health was not great. I was a very big guy. And my girlfriend, she'd come to me and expressed concern for my health whenever my mom passed. And I told her, I said, look, I'll get back in shape. At the time I was 40 years old. I said, I'll get back in shape. But I'm going to fight if I do. I said, I won't fight in the cage no more. I won't kickbox or Muay Thai. I said, but I'm going to come back to boxing. And she agreed to that. I came back, I put away my opponent in less than a minute, on my return. I'd been away for fighting. That was in December 2018. I'd been away from fighting for 5.5 years, outside of just being a coach and matchmaking a little bit. And from there, it just kind of sparked the coaching again. The coaching bug came back. A lot of my fighters came out of the woodwork whenever they knew that I was going to coach again. They wanted to work with me. That lasted for, a few years from 2018 to probably about 2021, 2022. And finally, I just, it went from coaching athletes and effort to what I deem as coaching emotions and attitudes these days. And I'm just not the guy for emotions and attitudes. Pardon me. But, whenever I had athletes and effort, I could sit there and coach you all day long. I could talk to you about your personal problems. I could teach you the mental side of focus and strength and, how to be tenacious in what you do. And whenever it became more of a he said, she said, that drill's too hard. I don't like that. And what a lot of kids have these days, because they have reasons and excuses as to why they can't do something. I just realized that, the coaching hill was done with me. I was ready to come down off that hill. I think I'm one of the more recognized coaches in Colorado for the time that I've put in, the athletes that I've worked with, the champions that I have helped build or help coach. But that all of that comes with the fact that I recognized what my position was, and my position wasn't to be their spotlight or be in their spotlight. My position was to coach and let them do their job. And way too many coaches, they chase glory through their athletes, through their fighters. They want to see you go out there and win so they can be the first person to jump in your spotlight. Or, if you don't win or don't get your hand raised, they got to go to the back real quick instead of waiting for you. And I was never that guy. If my fighters won, I stepped out of their spotlight, made sure they had their moment. Then I went back to the drawing board to figure out how can I elevate them and make them better. If they lost, I would always remind them that the wins are for the fighters, the losses are for the coaches. If you don't get your hand raised, that means I didn't do something right. We missed something, and I got to go back to the drawing board and I got to shoulder that load so that I can figure out how to make sure we don't get back to that, how we don't lose like that again. For the losses that I did take over the years, I never lost the same way. So I was able to really coach people, on how to improve and how to move past that. So 2022 rolls around. Probably the last couple of people that I'm even working with, fighters that I'm coaching. I'm still coaching at a gym at this time, mainstream, but that would end shortly into 2022 and early 2023. I take a backseat to a younger coach that I brought in. I let him kind of take over. Didn't really like seeing the direction that he was going. He still to today even works more with a black belt in jiu-jitsu to where he's kind of fast tracking his fighters or his jiu-jitsu people. I mean, I watched one kid go from being a two-stripe blue belt to he's now a brown belt inside of less than 2 years. And how that's even possible, the legit way it's not, so it's ridiculous. But they're getting accredited, everything else, and I just don't follow that type of stuff. Like I said, emotions, attitudes, and falsifying your instruction. It just kind of pushed me out the door where I didn't want to be a part of it as a coach anymore. In 2022, towards the end of the last couple of fighters I actually coached, at that time, Jeff Cisneros was recovering from an injury himself. He had an accident. He was struggling to match a couple of fights, for an upcoming card in November 2022. He had reached out to me and asked if I could help out, and I matched 3 or 4 fights for him. And after that, it just kind of took off because I pulled him aside. We've been friends for a lot of years. There was even a period where he didn't have his memory anymore from one of his accidents where I just had to keep in contact with him to let him know who I was in his life, how we met, everything else. And after that November 2022, he really leaned on me and started letting me take over the matchmaking. At this time, he wasn't working with the same person who was matchmaking beforehand back in the mid 2010s. And he just kind of let me run with it, and Sparta has just blown up even more. We were a national brand before COVID. We're getting back to being a national brand this year, traveling out of state here in the next couple of months, and just still working on kind of growing and just being better at what we do. But I explained to him then exactly what I said a little bit ago. I'm always going to have a coach's mind before I have a business mind. I'm not chasing dollar bills. I'm chasing fair opportunities. And I think whenever we approach it the way we do, with the respect that we do and the passion that we do towards towards combat sports as a whole, because we're one of the rare promotions that offer everything: MMA, boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, bare knuckle. We offer it all. I'm one of those guys who has fought in all of that. So I approach it with, I'm looking at fair opportunities to offer these coaches for their young fighters. Way too many promotions and promoters, they want to talk to fighters directly. I don't. I want to talk to coaches. I want to talk to managers. I want to talk to people who could make a great, mind that has a great mindset for the business and understands what we're doing here, instead of a young fighter who's just hungry and eager and willing to just accept any fight. So, it's put me in a great position now as the director of operations for Sparta, director of fight operations and matchmaking for the last 3 years. I've watched us grow. I've been a part of that. I've and I'll continue to do so. And yeah, that's kind of where it's come from. Full circle from not only the coaching and matchmaking, but sprinkling in a couple of more fights here and there, and still getting out there. Whenever I decided to come back in November, that was to show people that even as the director of operations, I'm an old school warrior first. I was willing to get in my own ring, put my own life on the line, put my name at stake, and say, "Hey, let's see where this goes. Let's have some fun."
Absolutely. That is incredible, Vern. That is an absolutely incredible story. And wow, I mean, I am. You should write a book. Yeah, you should absolutely write a book about your life. I mean, that would be one
You,
absolute page turner. And I,
Liam, it's funny that you say that because this year, just a couple of months ago, I wrote a memoir. I wrote my book. I'm actually in the process right now of working with a publishing coach to teach me the proper steps to get it published and to I mean, right now my book's actually in editing. I wrote 50 chapters, of my life that starts out with a kind of a synopsis, in the first chapter of just kind of a rundown of everything. And then it goes chapter to chapter, just kind of talks about, everything from my upbringing, as tough as my dad was, to, my sports that I played as a youth, football and boxing primarily, to the military, to my troubles in and out of the military, to being recalled, back to serve again. I mean, I wrote a book. Yeah, I really did.
that is incredible. I look forward to that coming out because absolutely today we've only scratched the surface, that much I'm sure of, but we have shared some absolutely incredible things. You have shared some absolutely incredible wisdom that really helps people. Yeah, we've had the fight stories, we've had the cool stuff, we've heard the war stories, literally, and in the ring to some extent of both. But at the same time, we've got those lessons, those life lessons, the mental toughness, the PTSD, the looking in the mirror, what looks back at you, all of these things you shared, absolute gems of wisdom. And that's the thing that I'm most appreciative for, is because I always say when I do these, that if we touch even one person's life to do something a bit differently, even though people throw that around as a cliche, it is true. I mean, I'm going to put this out, people listen to it in all different countries. And, even one person says, okay, you know what, I can change my direction, I can do something positive with myself, anything like that, then we've done our work. And like you, nearly 300 fights. I'm on over 500 episodes of this show now, and it's the same
Very
thing.
good.
When I get that feedback, people saying, "Hey, Liam, we put this out there, and it really helped that person." That's what makes it worthwhile, man. Is it's not about me. It's all about helping others. And today, we've done that 110%. And I tell you what, Vern, I will be cheering for you with these four fights you've got left, but also in anything you do helping others, passing on your knowledge with the matchmaking, with everything that you do in the book. I mean, people can learn a lot from when your book gets out there. It's
Yeah,
gonna make a great movie as well. That's the next step, even after that. But first of all, the book, it's absolutely awesome. As I mentioned, I'm gonna have to go shortly, but I just want to thank you so much for your time. And more than for your time, I want to thank you so much for being an open book, because it's one thing talking about the fights, but it's a whole other thing when you're getting into like your dad, PTSD, things you've overcome in your life, the drinking, all of that stuff. Putting that out there in order to help others, that's on a whole other level than just sitting down and talking about the fights. And I deeply respect your sincerity as well. That's the last thing I want to say because when you've been sharing this story, there's no frills there. I mean, you very much the highs, the lows, this, that, and the other, very much telling it as it is. And I know that that's the kind of type of guy you are, but at the same time, it's very refreshing to be quite honest with you to hear it just straight from the heart like that, the way you've shared this today. So on all of those things, absolutely appreciate you, brother. Good luck with your recovery and with your niece's recovery. My prayers there as well. And just yeah, once again, thank you for everything you shared, man. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you, Liam. Thank you for the, having the opportunity to talk with you this morning and share a little bit about myself and, with the world. I'm just one of those guys who I don't understand, or I've never comprehended, giving up or quitting. I don't know how to do that. My greatest fear in life is the fear of failure. So I'm struggling every day to make sure I don't fail. And if I can, like you just said, touch one life out there, that's what it's about for me. That's why I wrote a book, because whenever I talk in a room, especially with young people, they generally listen, quite a bit. And they realize that I've experienced a lot. I've been through a lot. I'm not no hero, and I'm not no world name. I'm not the greatest fighter that's ever been out there, but I am somebody who has had my ups, my downs, my bouts with, my personal demons, with the law, with everything else, and it all comes back around to me. So the last thing I'd like to offer before we get off here, and again, thank you so much for your time, is if there's one thing that I could offer to younger people out there at all, one piece of advice is you're going to make mistakes, and don't be so hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Enough of the people around the world want to do that for you. So learn from your mistakes and move forward. Be persistent, be resilient, keep bouncing back, and keep climbing until you get to the top of that hill.
Wonderful advice. Powerful way to close out. Absolutely powerful. Thank you so much, Vern. And it's honestly, I knew this would be good, but honestly, it's way exceeded the expectations I've had. I mean that hand on heart. So I'll send this to you as well. When I put this up on my YouTube, I'll send
Please
this.
do.
Anything that you'd like to do with it, be my guest. But for now, you have a great day and enjoy the rest of your day. It's crazy the time thing because over here I'm in Cyprus. By the way, I can't remember if I told you that. So it's 6 p.m. over here at like the end
Yeah.
of my day, and your day's just starting. So I think that is absolutely wild. But anyway, yeah, you enjoy the rest of it, my friend, and we'll speak soon for sure. We'll keep in touch. But yeah, honestly, thank you again for everything. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Liam.
Take care. All right. Thank you again. Bye now.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.